What's up, guys? Welcome back to Racing Direct. Of course, today we have to get into the crazy battle that ensued at the Austrian Grand Prix between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, because this championship battle is heating up, and it's something that we didn't think we were going to get this season, especially at the start when we see Verstappen and Perez and Red Bull just running off into the sunset again. But lo and behold, we flash forward a few races later and a few months into the season, we actually have a slight championship battle on our hands, and things are getting interesting. But once again, as it usually happens with Max Verstappen, things have already reached a boiling point. So we are going to cover who's in the right and who's in the wrong during that infamous now Austrian Grand Prix incident. So of course, I'll remind you guys the magic words: subscribe, like, comment, and share. It's good to be back, everybody. Thanks for your patience. It's been pretty busy lately, but without further ado, let's jump into the Austrian Grand Prix incident. So yeah, we don't really need too much catching up. I think we all saw what happened out there. It looked like it was going to be another easy victory for Verstappen, but we go into the pit stops. A very bad pit stop for Verstappen, a very good pit stop for Norris, and something was obviously happening with that Red Bull. There was some issues, and something was falling off. The pace was just dwindling every single lap, and Norris was honing in on Verstappen. It looked like it was going to be Norris's second career Grand Prix victory, until it wasn't, and George Russell swooped in out of nowhere and took it by surprise. And of course, the massive talking point that has been going on ever since the Grand Prix finished, or ever since that crash happened, is how exactly did this happen? Well, there were multiple attempts for Norris to get by Verstappen, so many dive bombs. He tried going outside and inside, cutting back, doing an over-under, switchback. Nothing was working. He was learning the hard way, the way that Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and so many before them realized racing against Max Verstappen is not easy, and yes, it can be blood boiling. Now, we all know what ultimately happened. Max Verstappen was deemed guilty in the final incident. When Norris tried to go to the outside, it looked like he was setting up for the switchback, and ultimately he was right at the edge of the circuit. Verstappen made a slight jerk to the left, like he was setting up for a normal racing line, but Norris was already there, as we saw. They both get punctures. Norris retires. Verstappen is relegated down to 5th position. And both of them were at odds over the crash about who was at fault and who should take the blame. So let's kind of look at what happened here and who honestly should be taking the blame in this incident. Now look, up until this point, or when the crash happened actually, I thought it was really good, hard racing. Honestly, I thought both drivers were kind of doing stuff that was pretty borderline. A couple of those Norris dive bombs were rather ambitious. We clearly saw he wasn't going to even make the corner on a couple of them. We've seen that quite a bit in the past from even Verstappen himself on numerous occasions, and plenty of other drivers are guilty of doing this as well. So those were some borderline overtaking attempts from Norris. Again, I didn't really have massive problems with them because both drivers were keeping their nose clean. Even when the overtakes were a bit dodgy, the overtaking attempts, both of them seemed to make way for each other. And Verstappen, of course, we heard Norris was complaining that he was moving under braking. And obviously that's something you cannot do in Formula 1. You get a couple warnings and then you get a penalty. But even still, it seemed like, well, they're racing each other hard. They're both doing things that are considered borderline. So just let them have fun. Let the fans have fun. Enjoy this crazy battle that's ensuing on track. I had no issues with what was going on. Of course, yes, both fan bases were pretty divisive in the heat of the moment. There was, calling for penalties to Verstappen, calling for penalties to Norris. Norris ultimately did end up getting a track limits penalty for running over the white line on too many occasions. So it was so obvious that Lando was very determined to get by Max and put up a 5-second gap between them before it was too late. And that's part of the reason why he was doing some very ambitious overtaking attempts as well. So ultimately, we all saw what happened. Norris was trying the dive bomb overtakes. They weren't working. Verstappen was defending very, very well, as he usually does. And sometimes, of course, he's over the edge in the eyes of many people, but on this occasion, he was doing a very good job at keeping Norris behind. So Norris had to try something different. He went to the outside to set up a switchback for the next DRX zone on the next straightaway, and ultimately he didn't even get to that point because Verstappen moved over to the left just a slight bit, but that was all it really took to give both drivers a puncture and ruin both of their races. Now, the stewards made a very quick decision, and they decided that Verstappen was at fault for this incident. 10-second time penalty. Ultimately, it didn't really end up doing it. He was already relegated down to 5th, and the gap behind him was so far. The 10 seconds was pretty much obsolete, which is sort of like what happened when Hamilton took Verstappen out in Silverstone 2021, received a 10-second time penalty, and just ended up winning the race anyway. It had no effect on him. He was finishing in the exact same position regardless of that penalty. But on this occasion, Verstappen had already kind of penalized himself once he had that contact with Norris and gave himself a puncture. So honestly, you could say or you argue that the 10-second penalty was pointless. He should have had way more than that, or a complete grid drop penalty. No, I think the 10 seconds was fair enough. There's nothing super egregious here. I do feel that, yes, he was in the wrong, but the 10-second penalty was more than enough just to give some points on his license and decide that, yes, you are at fault. We need to let you know this. But I think it's pretty clear as well, the stewards decided that he pretty much already effectively ruined his own race with that slight change of movement in the braking zone, and that was that. Nothing else to do. Now, here's the side of the Verstappen fan base, or the side of their debate in this incident, saying that, well, why is he getting a penalty for this? Norris should have moved onto the curb, or why didn't Norris get any more penalties for his crazy overtaking attempts? Well, we kind of have to take a flashback to this, because I think there is a bit of sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, rose-tinted glasses maybe. I'm not sure if that's the right analogy for this incident. Seems like people are forgetting, though, that Verstappen did do similar moves to other drivers in the past. And even at this exact same track, or just the exact same corner back in 2019, I believe it was, when Verstappen did win the Austrian Grand Prix by performing a very, very similar overtake to what Norris was trying to do on him when he did it to Charles Leclerc, of course, setting a massive dive bomb up the middle. Leclerc had to go way off track to avoid any contact. Verstappen didn't end up getting a penalty for that, and he ultimately won the Grand Prix. And that's really why I had no issue with Norris attempting this, or Verstappen sort of maybe forcing him off track a couple of times, or having to run off track to, I guess you could say, gain an advantage, but at the end of the day, just trying to avoid some contact. I had no issue with this. Honestly, I think if both drivers are on a level playing field and they're both sort of over the line, but they're keeping their noses clean and staying out of contact, and just let them at it, I had no issue. But on the initial contact that Verstappen made that caused the incident, yes, you can clearly see he moves to the right to sort of take his line, and then as Norris is already lining up his line into the corner, way on the outside on the edge of the track, Verstappen moves back over and they make contact. And on the argument that I guess Norris could have moved over onto the curb, I really don't agree with that. You could say that, yes, if he wanted to avoid contact, he could have done that, but it was so late into the braking zone, I don't think Norris even really noticed that Verstappen was coming over again. It was just a slight movement, but it was enough to cause a collision. That's what the stewards saw in their eyes. And this is why Verstappen was deemed at fault, and this is why I completely agree with them. It really shouldn't be on the driver that's way at the edge of the track to say, well, you have to move onto the curb. Well, that's not really the idea. You're supposed to give both drivers enough racing room on the circuit and not force them off the track and say, well, you need to take to the curb or take avoiding action there. Now, to play devil's advocate, and I will not rule this out, you could say the same thing about maybe Verstappen could have run offline at Silverstone in 2021 when Hamilton hit him pretty hard, or sort of backed out of the corner. We all knew that in that championship year, that was absolutely hectic. Neither one of those drivers want to give either of each other any room on the circuit. So that's just a bit of devil's advocate, to be honest. You could take it how you wanted it, but I still believe that like a driver that's on the outside, he knows he's putting himself out there, but at the same time, you do have to give him some respect and some room. And I think Norris thought that Verstappen wasn't going to move over again, was going to play it a little more fair than he did. And it really shouldn't be on Norris to go onto the curb to take avoiding action. He should have the trust of the driver on the inside. He's not going to make a second maneuver and change his line so late into the corner. And like, it was pretty obvious that Norris was not trying to sweep around the outside of this corner. It's pretty much impossible unless you're talking about at the start of the Grand Prix when there's cars everywhere and it's a bit hectic. He was not trying to do that. There's a double DRS zone here. The detection zone is pretty late going into that corner, so as long as he stayed behind Verstappen, he's going to get DRS on the next corner. Pretty obvious he was trying to set up an old-fashioned switchback and try to catch Verstappen lacking, which is much easier said than done. It's a very good reason why Verstappen is the best in the world right now. I think Verstappen was wise to what Norris was doing, tried to fend it off and try to defend from it, but ultimately he just went a bit too far, didn't give Norris the space that he needed, and ultimately this ended both races for both drivers. Verstappen could finish and get P5. Norris was ultimately DNF, but it was not the result that either of them wanted, so both sort of penalized each other. So yes, I could say that both drivers were sort of in the wrong throughout their battle, but again, hard-fought racing. I'm so glad the stewards just kept their noses out of it and let these guys at it. But of course, when contact is made and an incident doesn't happen, a driver DNFs and another driver has to pit for some serious damage, that is when the stewards do have to get involved and decide that, look, a penalty has to be given out. There was serious contact made here that ruined the race for one driver and obviously took another driver completely out of the Grand Prix. they had to get their noses involved, and in this decision, I think they were in the right. Norris was not really given enough space, and yes, you could say that he shouldn't have put himself on the outside, but Verstappen ultimately moved twice under braking and caused the collision. So that is pretty much my verdict there. Now, whether or not it's going to boil over, I don't know. These guys are pretty close friends. You can see the reporters afterwards, especially Sky Sports, just grilling Norris and Verstappen, asking if they were coming to a boiling point. Norris said that he might lose some respect for Verstappen if he didn't take any of the blame. Verstappen kind of played it off and said, you know, it's not really that serious. We were mad at each other in the heat of the moment, but he's sure they're going to talk about it. And look, I'm sure they're going to sort it out. Yes, they are friends. Whether or not that changes down the line with the championship battle gets much closer than it is right now. Of course, look, Rosberg and Hamilton were very good friends, and we all know how that boiled over once they had a championship on the line between them. That's something that has to be decided in the future. But right now, I think everybody should just leave this in the past. I think the stewards made the right decision. What happened, happened, and I think both drivers are just going to move on. And honestly, Red Bull needs to forget this too and just focus on getting their car faster, because right now, I think McLaren is on level pegging with the car performance. The only difference right now is Max Verstappen is doing Max Verstappen things and ensuring he stays ahead in the championship. But the fight for Norris and McLaren is right there. So these battles will get spicier. Sure, this is not the last contact we will see between these drivers before the end of the season. Honestly, it's just exciting to have a good championship fight on our hands again. Formula One is officially back. But let me know what you guys think. Do you feel that these stewards made the right call? Was Verstappen at fault here? Should the stewards just have dropped it all together and just let it go? No penalties handed out? Do you think Norris is being too aggressive with those dive bombs? Give me all your opinions and all your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, I want to hear it and discuss with you guys. It's good to be back on the channel, and there should be a lot to talk about in the coming days and the coming weeks too as this championship battle heats up. So, of course, once again, the same reminder, subscribe, like, comment, and share. We'll see you next time on Racing Direct.